The reason we know about dinosaurs is because they died. Um, Although birds are dinosaurs, but that's another talk. Here we show an oviraptor running from something, obviously, scaring up the female oviraptor that's laying on the nest of eggs. And for some unknown reason, here's a sandstorm that's going to cover her up and her nest. So she perishes. It's very sad, but we have to have things die to dig up their fossils. So what happens is over time, the skin rots away and you're left with bones, and more layers of dirt build up, but then groundwater seeps in carrying minerals, and these minerals seep through the soil and replace the organic material in the bones. And that's how bones become fossilized. Even the eggs become fossilized because they're calcium. And then later, the way we discover the bones is mostly through erosion. You'll see later on some techno principles for finding fossils, but mostly fossils are exposed through erosion. So it's either the sun baking the soil, soil freezing in temperatures and coming apart. Again, that pesky sandstorm eroding the land, and then over time, the fossils are exposed. Excuse me. And that's because the surface exposure is how most paleontologists find fossils. Now, in the old days, like probably just 10 years ago, they would keep track of where fossils were found and what they found through hand-drawn bone maps. Now, this one's been redone using a drawing program, but excuse me, all of this data was acquired and recorded by hand. But today, we have this thing called real-time kinematics, and it's a GPS unit that can go around a quarry when they're exposing fossils and pinpoint where things are and map out the entire area on the computer. Here's an example. It's not just mapping out for one reason, for various reasons. This map of a quarry has been worked for between 2013 and 2016. But they can keep track over the years of what they found by using this GPS method. Excuse me. Now this is a map showing that everything they found. And within the little pie charts are like, whether they found bones or teeth, they can keep track of that in their grid system. But it's also good for finding the size of specimens, a lot of fragments, and it shows their deposition and location. And using the same data, they can come up with, a specific species, and all these green lines show where they found crocodile specimens. So that's a little bit better than hand drawing and a lot more information gathered. Another new technology is actually taking the fossil specimens and hitting it with a laser. And then the laser information is recorded, and they can actually find out what that fossil is made of and where it came from, because they can match up the composition of the fossil to the type of ground that it came out of. And this has been very important in, especially on Native American lands where fossils have been taken out, that they can go to a museum that has one of these fossils, analyze it with a laser, and say, oh, it belongs back on this Native American land. So a lot of repatriation of fossils are going on. Excuse me. But something else you can do with this technology, this is a feather of an Archaeopteryx, one of the first birds, if not the first bird. It can be analyzed, excuse me. Go away. It can be analyzed through melanosomes, which are tiny little structures that tell you what color was there at one time. You have these things called anyway, it's that word. They represent black pigments. And then we have the these that represent the red pigments. And it's different amounts of these pigments and the absence of these structures that give us the varying colors, anywhere from a black to a gray, all the way up to a brown. So some of the first birds that they're finding out of China have these structures, and this is a theoretical representation of Microraptor, but it's all made up of these colors, a lot of grays and browns and whites and blacks. Now, not all dinosaurs had feathers, but that's another story. Now, this is some old tech as far as replicating fossils. This is kind of like what I do. You take a fossil specimen, you coat it in a silicone rubber to make a mold. And after this sets, you can peel it off and then pour in plaster or plastic, whichever you want, and make a copy. And a lot of the fossils you see on display in museums are replicas like this, because either the real fossil is too fragile or too heavy, and they have it in a climate-controlled area. But they let you see an exact copy on display. But there are other ways of replicating fossils. Scanning is one, 3D scanning. So we have a T-Rex skull here, and our computer all warmed up. Then it is hit with a scanning gun. Now these are varied, they come in different shapes and sizes, but basically a handheld scanner. It sends out a laser onto the surface, and then is recorded by the same handheld scanner. And then using that data, line by line, it gives you a model of the skull, or whatever fossil. Then you can take that data and put it on a 3D printer, print this baby out. This is called a filament printer, meaning that it uses like a plastic filament on a spool, and it kind of goes through like a glue gun almost, only a miniature, and it builds these layers up line by line until you get the final product like this. And the cool thing about these filament printers is you can reduce and enlarge your specimen. So you can print it out small, you can print it out table size, or like this guy's doing, full size. And this is all done on a 3D printer. Now that had to be done in pieces and then glued together, but it's still pretty impressive. Excuse me just a second. Talk amongst yourselves. All right, I showed you the filament printer. Another way of printing is through powder sintering. And what it does, it takes layers of powder, and it's hit with a laser, layer by layer. And then another layer of powder is laid down. It's hit with another laser, another layer of powder is down, until it builds up the bone, which like that guy is holding, that replica. And another way is through resin. So you basically, it's like the powder sintering, only you have a pool of resin, and the laser is hitting the top surface, and then the build plate builds up a little bit. It does the next layer, builds up a little bit, does the next layer, until you get a structure like this. Now those things that are coming off the neck, those are support structures for the model, but those just snap off. The very cool thing about having this scanning technology and 3D printing is, well, this is an example. When scientists release a new paper or describe a new fossil, nowadays they can scan the fossil and send you the file as well as the description paper. So this is a good example. There's this little dinosaur called Aquilops, which is supposed to be a predecessor of Triceratops. And when they sent out the paper on this, they also sent out a 3D file of the actual fossil. This is the fossil, which then you can turn around if you have a printer, print one up. So you actually have a replica of the fossil to go along with the paper, so you can get a better understanding of what's going on with the fossil and its structures. So that's pretty cool. This is another good example. In the 1970s, some guys in Alabama found a dinosaur egg. And it's the only egg that's been found this side of the Mississippi, I'm pretty sure. Anyways, it's attributed to ornithomimosaurs, which are kind of like ostrich-looking dinosaurs. But if you look carefully on the one on the image on the right, you can actually see leg bones in there. So this had an embryo in it. Anyway, this was scanned, and this file is available to print. So took this and actually had it printed on a 3D printer, and here's a copy of it. And it shows all the structures on the inside. You see the little bones and everything, just like the original. I had the opportunity to do a life restoration of Australopithecus sediba for a museum in South Africa. And fortunately, they had a 3D file on this guy. So that's been reconstructed with the jaw in blue and everything. So I took a print of this, had it printed, and turned around and made a plaster copy of it because I was going to be burying it in clay, and I didn't want to ruin the 3D print. So you can see little by little, that's kind of gruesome looking, but it's just plaster and clay with some eyes set in it. A little more clay building up the features. A little bit more, looking a little more human, if you will. Gave him some ears. And again, this is all based on a 3D print of the skull. Then we add a little hair. And then on top of that, we're doing silicone again, my technology, painting it up in layers so you have a mold that you can just peel off. And this looks like a Jedi, but it's really the inside of the mold. And from this, you seal it back up, and you can pour plaster or plastic in whatever you want and make a replica. This is a faux bronze replica, which we actually have one on the end here you're welcome to take a look at later. One question about doing restorations of dinosaurs or any prehistoric animal is you go, how do we know? So this is a printed 3D model of a skull of an elephant. You know, we know what elephants look like, but the ancient Greeks, they didn't know what elephants look like. They went, well, this guy must have this hole in the middle must be his eye socket, so he must be a cyclops. So that's where the legend of the cyclops came from. But, all right, let's pretend like we don't know what elephants are, but we're a little bit more sophisticated than the Greeks. And we know that hole in the middle is for nostrils, and we can see eye sockets on either side. But typically, fleshy parts do not fossilize. So we wouldn't know that it had a trunk. We wouldn't know it had big floppy ears. So we might end up with something like this, which I call a walrus. So the thing is, when we reconstruct a prehistoric animal, it's a lot of guesswork. I mean, it's educated guesswork, but it's still guesswork all the same. Okay. Now, a lot of people go, well, how can they find a little bone or a piece of bone of a dinosaur and then tell you how long it was or how big it was? Well, we have to base it on, a known specimen. But this is a good example of how easy it is, really. All right, this is a T-Rex skull. It measures about 54 inches long. Now, we happen to know that a T-Rex skull is an eighth of its body length. So you take that 54 inches, and you times it by 8, and you get 432 inches. And then you divide that by 12, and you get 36 feet long. So that's how we can estimate how long a dinosaur might be just from one bone, from its skull. But the cool thing is, say you didn't find a T-Rex skull, well, guess what? The skull length of a T-Rex kind of matches up with its hip length, or its ilium length, and its femur length. So if you find the ilium or a femur, you can still calculate the length of the dinosaur, which is kind of cool. Let me tell you a little bit about the dinosaurs we have here in Georgia and reconstructing their world. We had a T-Rex relative called Appalachiosaurus, which is a little bit smaller than T-Rex. But when we had a carnivore dinosaur, there's got to be something for it to eat. So we know that there were herbivores here as well. And this is Lathorohothon, which was an herbivore that we've actually found in Georgia. But if you have adult dinosaurs, they had to start off as babies. So we know there were baby dinosaurs here, which is represented by this Appalachiosaurus hatchling. And if you have baby dinosaurs, you got to have eggs. Now, I don't know of any eggs that have been found in our state, but evidenced by the dinosaur egg they found in Alabama. We probably had them here. They just didn't fossilize, or they haven't been found. Also reconstructing the world of dinosaurs, it turns out that T-Rex had a very, very, very huge olfactory center, meaning that it had an excellent sense of smell. So it probably was like good at finding dead things to eat. But you think about, well, what did it smell other than dead things? Like conifers. Or if there was volcanic activity, they would smell volcanoes. And then, of course, carrion. Here in our state, they probably smelled magnolias, because those have been around since the Cretaceous. And my favorite, territory, meaning, somebody's marked off their land. So it's just things that can become involved when you're recreating a world of dinosaurs. Now, I understand there was some dinosaur movie called Jurassic Park, something about that. I'm going to kind of explain some technology used in that, or the history of the technology of Jurassic Park. Steven Spielberg and Universal wanted to do this movie, so they hired out experts in special effects to work on it. One guy was Stan Winston Studios. They handled all the practical effects, like the dinosaurs that were going to be on set, or close-ups of the T-Rex head and such. All the mechanical things like this. A very famous special effects group called Industrial Light and Magic that did all the Star Wars special effects and such were in charge of the dinosaurs running around when you see them on the screen moving around in the distance and such. At first they were going to use models, stop motion models. This guy's Phil Tippett. He's a very famous animator. He worked on the Star Wars movies doing the animation, and Dragon Slayer and RoboCop, he worked on that. But he was going to use very traditional methods, which is a model that had a skeleton in it, usually made of metal, like aluminum and joints that could be easily flexed and easily posed. And what they would do is, frame by frame, they would get it in position, take a photo of that, a frame of film, move it a little bit more, take a frame of film, a little bit more. Very tedious. But they came up, here's the test footage of what they did. So it's not too bad. What they were going to do is, if you've ever seen, the Jason and Argonauts movies and Sinbad and stuff, when you see the 3D animation, there's a slight jerkiness to it. So they were going to take these models, photograph them, and then they were going to have them on the computer, have a blur put in between, so it would help stop that strobing. Well, these two guys said, hey, if we're going to do that, why don't we just, do the dinosaurs in the computer anyway? And everybody said, no, it would never work. It would never work. But these guys were rebels, so in their spare time, they worked on designing a dinosaur that could move in the computer. And sure enough, they came up with this. And this test footage convinced Steven Spielberg and the producers, like, yeah, let's do it all computer generated. Which looks a lot better, I must say, than the standard animation. Well, Phil Tippett, the animator, goes, I'm out of a job, I'm extinct. But they said, no. You can put the dinosaurs in the movies, but you still need to make them act. So they invented this thing called the dinosaur input device, or the DID. And it was basically like an animation puppet, but it had all these sensors. So they were able to go into key frames and position the dinosaur and get all the subtleties of animation, but using the computer to do it. Nowadays, I don't think they do that anymore, but this was early on. But it was very effective. One cool thing about computers and in movies, they can be very subtly. Now, not to spoil alert if you're going to see the Jurassic Park movie, there's a part where the girl actress falls through a ceiling. But in the movie, they used a stunt woman, but she looks up at the camera And so they had the stunt woman's face. So what they did, they went in and superimposed the girl actress's face on top of the stunt woman instead of having to refilm the whole scene. So that was kind of cool. This is supposed to loop, but come on. Oh well, anyway. One other cool side thing, this guy named John Knoll, he was hired to work on the special effects for the Star Wars movies, and he became an effects supervisor on, I think, Rogue One, that Star Wars movie. But the very cool thing about him and computers is he and his brother invented Photoshop. And you can see right there, Thomas and John Knoll, they were the inventors of Photoshop. So that's a good kind of tie-in right there. Speaking of making dinosaurs for movies, I've never done that, but I did make a giant T-Rex once. Back in the old days, that was me when I was not as big and had more hair. Anyway, I got to build this life-size T-Rex. Started off with styrofoam. I find that you just take a block of foam and carve away everything that doesn't look like a T-Rex, and that's very easy that way. But rented a warehouse and actually carved this thing over about 3 or 4 months. I had a lot of help too. There it is with the teeth. And then it was disassembled and moved to Michigan, to a kids' mall, and there it is in the middle of putting it together, and we had no idea how we were going to get it together, but somehow we did. And there it stood until the mall went belly up, and they called me and said, "How do we get this T-Rex apart?" I said, "You don't. It's supposed to stay there." But I told them if they cut the head and the tail and the legs off at certain points, then wherever they ended up, I could come put it back together for them. Well, I got a call back about a year later. I said, "What happened to that T-Rex?" And they said, "Well, we cut the head and tail off and threw the rest away." So can you imagine a dumpster outside that mall with dinosaur legs sticking out? Fortunately, the head came back to Georgia, and now it's at Georgia College in Milledgeville. They have it on display. Finally, I want to tell you about PAG. We're the Paleontological Association of Georgia. We're open to anybody, professionals, amateurs. If you have a passing fancy in paleontology, we'd love to talk to you and have you as a member. I do have some brochures up here on either table that you're welcome to get one. They have a neat little timeline on the back, geologic timeline. Unfortunately, the scale over here, the printer messed up, so they're not accurate. So don't use these for commerce or anything important. But the timeline's still good. And speaking of technology, hey, these days we can do slideshows right here on the computer without a big projector and everything, so it all works out. That's it for what I have to say, and I'm welcome any questions that you might have.
Anybody have questions?
So you mentioned that there's these like 3D files, when they scan the fossils. Is there like an open source repository somewhere where you can go and you can like download files?
You can go to this place right off the top of my head. It's called Thingiverse, and they just have tons of stuff, and a lot of them are free. And they encourage people to get them and remix them and just do whatever you want with them. But yeah, Thingiverse is a good place to start. And there's also another one called Yeggi, Y-E-G-G-I. But yeah, it's amazing what's out there, just for free. Anybody else?
So I have a question. In the book and movie Jurassic Park, in the opening scenes, Alan Grant is using a special device that basically fires slugs into the ground to map dinosaurs with sonography. Is something like that still being utilized, or what is replaced that, if there is something?
I think they use more like a ground-penetrating radar now, rather than that. That seems kind of destructive to me. But yeah, they just use kind of a radar type thing now. And with that mapping thing, they can go to a known place that has fossils and go and map the area, usually with a a drone type situation. And then when they find more of the area, when they find similar areas like that where they have found fossils, they can usually find fossils there too. So that's a way of looking in there without disturbing too much.
You had shown us earlier in your presentation where they were using the GPS scan
Yes.
of a site. How often do they do it? Like every foot, every 6 inches? They only do it once?
No, well, they wait until there's something to look at. So that, I think, was done by year. It was kind of hard to tell, but there was like several bands that represented the different years where they dug in further. So they can go and say, hey, look, we found all these bones over here, and they can go and like record those, and then if later at the same time they go over here and find something, they can go record those. They don't have to do everything all at once. It's something you can add to using computers.
Yeah, I'm old school. I'm drawing in the boxes.
That's right.
And trying. That's how I did my digs. Any other questions? Yes.
Hi, good afternoon.
Hey.
Yeah, with the Paleontological Association of Georgia. So in Georgia, where are there any active dig sites or any active excavations going on?
The one I can think of that our group just went to last weekend is a site up near Trenton, Georgia, up in the northwest corner, and it's basically a cutaway behind a car wash, and you can find a lot of marine fossils like the Paleozoic type things like crinoid stems and maybe some trilobites. I'm not sure, but that's the only open one I can think of right now. The beaches of Georgia, you can find meg teeth occasionally. On Jekyll Island, where they dredge out the intercoastal waterway. On not so much Jekyll Island, Cumberland Island, they used to like just dump piles of it that they would use to pave their walkways. So it's like gravel and stuff that had fossils in it. I don't know if you can take them now because it is a park. But on Jekyll Island, on the intercoastal waterway side, you can find shark teeth and such. Well, there's a place called Shark Tooth Beach, which has become too popular now. But I would go there and pick up everything that wasn't a shark tooth. I was finding like camel teeth and mammoth bones and things like that. Just partial things, but still. We're trying to find a database with our group of like where you can go to dig. You often get permission for a group to go through, because I know the not kaolin, yeah, the kaolin mines and stuff would let people come in. The quarries would let groups come in, Boy Scouts and whomever, to look for fossils. Then you just have to really ask permission.
Can you tell us a little bit about what you've brought on the tables?
No.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, no, please. I'll be happy to. And thanks for reminding me. Down here we have the head of Australopithecus sediba. I think they named him Carabo. So this is him, life size. And the cool thing about doing restorations of especially ancient hominids like this is when I was working on this one, I realized I'm showing this guy how he looked right before he died. So that's kind of ominous and very, very humbling all at the same time. But we have some 3D prints. Coelacanth, which we still have today, but at one time it was thought to be extinct. Here's a 3D print of a Neanderthal skull that I used as a basis for a sculpture. All these are 3D prints that you can get off of, those places I was talking about, the Freeflings. Eoraptor, this is life size, but at the same time we have a Nanotyrannus, which is probably about a quarter the size of the actual skull. And then one of my favorite things is the prehistoric whale skull. We had him here in Georgia. This skull, though, in real life is about 4 feet long. And when I showed the sculpture of the Cyclops and Walrus, this is a 3D print of the elephant skull that I built on top of clay, and then I made molds of the sculptures so you can see the finished pieces here. The egg from Alabama, this is the actual 3D print of it. Unfortunately, I tried to clean some clay out of it, and I put in alcohol, and it fell apart. But you're welcome to open this up, and you can still see the little baby bones in there. And this is the thing with the silicone, showing how to make replicas of fossils, which you're welcome to pull apart and see the actual mold in there. Over here, 3D print of a Gorgonopsid from the Permian, baby Triceratops skull, which is 3D printed. This is a kind of cool thing. I found a file of a woolly mammoth skeleton, and then I also found a skeleton, a file of a human skeleton, and printed them both out to scale. And then down on the end here is a baby Appalachiosaurus model that is supposed to go into Fernbank Science Center, but we're in the middle of changing things around. So he may or may not go in, but anyway, I just brought it because it's cool.
So you mentioned about the Fernbank. I know the Telus Museum has a vast collection of, I call them copies, but when museums want to include a dinosaur, is there just a source material where they go and order a copy of an original dinosaur from one museum and put it in theirs, or how did they acquire their dinosaurs?
Most of the skeletal casts, there's a supplier for that. No, they're, if you got the bucks, they got the bones. But yeah, there's people that's all they do is supply skeletons to museums. Right, and a lot of times they'll make a copy of it, and whatever bones are missing, they'll make replicas of those. So most of the skeletons you see are kind of Frankenstein together anyway. Yeah, they'll go to the source, like a museum or whoever has the fossil, and make the molds of it. And then I think they have to pay a royalty to the owner for that as well. Yes?
So would any of the fossils or skeletons that we see in a science museum, like, in Chicago or New York, would those be real bones or would they always be casts?
Sometimes it's a mix of both. Because if they have, like, say the skull and neck of a T-Rex, but it's missing the part of the backbone or something, they could replace that with a replica. But a lot of times what you see is cast replicas, just like for weight, for one thing. Because if you've got a T-Rex skull that's 54 inches long and it's the real thing, that's going to weigh a lot. I mean, more than the actual bone did when it was alive, because it's all rock. So. Sure.
Those things you don't remember in science. I was thinking of volcanoes. You said that a lot of times just erosion over time reveals a beginning and then everyone can excavate. Throughout the world, are people looking around all the volcanoes? Because that would seem like a good place that would have captured them. They would have been caught in volcanoes at the end. So do people start looking around bases of volcanoes?
Yeah, but probably not because, there's stuff called pyroclastic flow that isn't actual lava, like is in Pompeii. Everywhere got trapped. It might burn it up. I don't know that anything's been ever found in lava, quote unquote lava, but if lava caught up with something, it would just burn it up. Yeah, and also you don't want to look around there because the lava's flowed over and probably hardened, so it's an extra layer, that you'd have to dig through if there was something under there. All righty then. Thank you very much.